I've had a really good thought on how to end child marriage. What you do is you legalize it and you tell people, you just need to put the age of the child, the age of the adult, and a name and address. And then behind their back, you see who comes to register for this marriage, and either just before the marriage or just after the marriage, you arrest that person on an unrelated crime, although you kind of might have to do it sort of on the day of the marriage, but I don't know how it would work, but because you need to do it kind of without them realizing that it's to do with the marriage. If you legalize the marriage and then just arrest any person that chooses to marry a 14-year-old or under, if you want to turn people into slaves, it's not a good idea, but if you want to choose evil people who want to turn children into slaves by marrying them and I don't know, that's why adults like children. The thought of me marrying a 12-year-old boy is ridiculous and sick. And okay, guys usually like to be the more dominant one, hence they, it's common for guys to go for younger, but that much younger, if you're 30 and you want to marry a 12-year-old, there's something wrong with you, and you're ill. You've got some sort of sickness in you. You should be an animal, and I really don't support child marriage at all. But it's so sick that I feel like the best way to catch these people would be to let them have these marriages and then use the marriage as evidence that they're a paedophile, and then you put them in prison. But you can't tell them that they're in prison for that reason, because then they'll just tell all their mates not to. They'll still have the marriage. They'll still do the deals that they want. But yeah, if you make something illegal, they're just going to hide it. They're still going to do the crime. They're still going to do whatever they want. They're just going to hide it. And I know legalizing it might encourage them to, but if you want to turn people into slaves, why not encourage them to make the wrong choices and then judge them? And that's kind of what God is doing. That's what my higher self is doing. She's setting up some sort of fake trap to see who wants to hurt me, and then using the ones that want to hurt me as evidence that they deserve to fear God more because of what the choices that they've chosen to make. And I feel like there's a lot of truth to that. If you want to stop a crime, if you make it illegal, they're just going to do it on the underground. Whereas if you make it legal and then you see who wants to do it, then they're a lot easier to catch that way. So yeah, I actually approve of that. I know it might mean that a lot of kids end up having sex, but they probably would have been in that same situation even if the marriage wasn't there. I mean, technically, a marriage is nothing more than just a piece of paper that says that people use to bind a person, not just for a one night or a two night, but they use it to bind that child for a long period of time. If you're married to someone, that's it. That's according to the marriage law. That's that marriage will continue until the marriage ends or the child dies or something, and I don't like these people who would think that child marriage is okay. It's not okay. I understand that life expectancies in some places is quite low. If you're likely to die before the age of 35, you can't really be having a child at 30, because there's a high chance that your child will die when he or she is only 5, and in which case you have to have a child at a young age, because you need to be there until the child is at least 20. Really, it's not good to lose your parent when you're only 20, but it's worse if it's less. But yeah, there is some good in young marriage, but not child marriage, and then therefore I feel like, but if you say that it's illegal, then it will just go underground. So it would be probably best to make it legal, find out who wants to go in this, and then maybe just before the marriage or just after the marriage, arrest them and then put them in some sort of work camp. There's some really useful work camps where you can force people to become sewers or work in a machinery or work this, and they used to have workhouses in England, which were terrible, horrible places. But yeah, if you know that there are some work camps that are basically full of men who wanted to marry children, then you wouldn't feel any guilt about these work camps. You wouldn't feel, there's a lot of hatred towards paedophiles or people that are attracted to children. So why not find out who these people are and then punish them for unrelated crimes. You could even do something like quite nasty to them, which is be like, a murder happened, we think you're the responsible, and they just come up with fake evidence. This is a fake, this is a picture of a real death. We think you did this. This is all the evidence. You're going to be in this prison until we've proved that you didn't do this crime. And really, they could be in there because they've just tried to marry a 12-year-old, and that they're going to be in there until that 12-year-old is 16. I would say that's a good age. Like, I wouldn't arrest people if they're 15, but if you want to make the most out of slavery, those are the people that I want you to enslave, people who wanted to enslave kids, because that's technically what a child bride is. A child bride is a slave. She's 12, she doesn't have life experience, she doesn't have education or knowledge, and you're basically crippling that person into just doing whatever you say, and that's why adults like children, because children do what they say. And well, that's also why prisoners prison guards like prisoners, because the prison guards can get the prisoners to do whatever they say. And if you're accusing someone of being a murderer, you've done this crime, you need to pay the fine for the crime that you've committed, even if the crime is not actually what they've done, but that they've done some other crime. I think anyone that marries a child does deserve to go into prison for a couple of years. And if you tell them that they're in prison for some other unrelated crime, so what? I mean, they were going to get a child to marry them, and when children get married, often they don't realise what marriage actually means. It means commitment to that person for a very long period of time. And if you're 12, even 14-year-olds, they shouldn't be making commitments to adults who when you're an adult, you have more choices, you have an ability to make good decisions, and when you're a child, you don't have this. And so to marry someone when at a period of time when they don't have this, it is abuse, it's cruelty. It's like finding someone that's incredibly drunk, forcing them to marry you, and then afterwards kind of being like, well, you have to be with me for the rest of my life now because that's part of what you arranged to do. And you're like, well, I didn't arrange to do that. I mean, it's you don't understand things when you're younger. And I feel like there's nothing wrong with playing karma and treating these people in the same way that they wanted to treat these children. I mean, that's technically how the whole world works. Bad things happen to people, but often bad things happen to people because they did bad things to people in their past life, and it's through making the mistakes and being the one that suffers. That's how you learn, and that's how you grow and stuff. So I think that's a good idea. I also think it's a good idea to have force abortions on kids that are 14 or under. You shouldn't be having kids if you're 14, even if you want the kid. Even if you're if my child was 14, not 15, 14 or 13, and she didn't want to get an abortion, I would happily slip her a drug that would force the abortion to happen, and afterwards be like, oh no, I didn't know that would happen. I would do that, because I don't think that 13 or 14-year-olds should be having kids. I don't think they're in the ability. 15 is different. I know when I was 12, I was determined to be treated like an adult. But I also feel like I kind of was an adult, and I don't think that most 12-year-olds were like how I was when I was 12. Most 12-year-olds are not capable of making lifelong decisions such as whether or not they can have a child or not, and therefore, I just had a vision of someone doing that to a child, like a sort of, I don't know, I had a vision of a 9-year-old child getting pregnant and wanting to keep the child, being like, no, I want the child. And then the doctor's just being like, okay, we're just going to do a scan now, and then actually giving her abortion without her knowing, and then a few days later, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. I had a vision of that just happening, and I was actually thinking like, yeah, I agree with that. If doctors were to force kids who get pregnant into having an abortion, even if the parents, I would say that should be legal. That's how much I support. Abortion is not murder; it is just killing of a fetus, and children should not be having children. Everyone deserves a good life, and children cannot offer a good life. I think there are some exceptions. If Britney Spears' sister had a child at 15, and Britney Spears is rich, and her sister too had a good career and stuff. So they could actually offer a child a decent life. But yeah, if you're a 9-year old that's just been raped by your uncle, and you're pregnant, and you want to keep the child because you don't like the idea of killing, and all your family are telling you, oh no, it's killing, you can't do this, you can't do this. I would say it should be legal for the hospital to actually be like, you know what, we're going to force this abortion because this child should not be having it. I think that should be illegal. It's like that puppy dog. There was a video that was very, very disturbing that I found yesterday. Some dog had been strangled for a very, very long time, cuts all the way around there, face all swollen, very, very skinny, and was had babies 10 days, so was probably in that condition, unable to stand up because she was so weak, strangled, bruised, inflated, and when they found these rescuers found her, they took the cord off, and they still, I noticed that they picked up the puppies and still placed the puppies to feed. It was almost like, even though the mother has gone through so much stuff, their main interest was actually the puppies, which is silly, because those puppies don't need to feed off that dying mother. That the puppies can, I don't know how long. I'm really hoping that when they got to the hospital, they realised, oh wait, yeah, this dog is actually dying, and therefore we need to hand rear the puppies, or did they force the mother to? They might think, oh, the mother wants to feed, but the mother's dying. She can't do that, and that's how I feel about children. If a 12-year-old gets pregnant and wants to keep the child, that child is a child, and she's not able to make the decisions on whether or not she's capable of offering a decent life to a child. If the family are rich, it's different. They do have the money. I'm sure the auntie, the grandmum, the parents can take on responsibility, and I know that happens. Sometimes kids do. I know that happened in EastEnders. There was a younger girl got pregnant, and the mother kind of adopted her basically, and said that I'm going to look after her, and that worked out fine because there was people around that could give that child a decent life. But if a child is pregnant, the parents aren't very good parents, they aren't around, they need to work, they don't have the money, then even if the child wants to keep it, I would say it should actually be illegal. It should be legal. Getting the wrong way around. It should be legal if the doctors and the people around think that this child or the family cannot give, a good life to that fetus when it turns into a baby, turns into a person. It's awful to think that you would allow poverty, and part of allowing poverty is allowing people who can't have kids to have kids. Now, if you really want a kid, and if you're poor, you should be able to. It might motivate you to try harder. But if you've got loads and you're still in poverty and you're barely looking after the ones that you've got, then forced abortion should be illegal, particularly if you're 14 or under. And I think I would not see that as murder. If you can see a 12-year-old wanting a child, pregnant, and not in the last stages, but in the midway stages, and that you've spoken to the parents, the aunties, they maybe want her to keep the child, but not because they can look after the child, not because they're sane or whatever, or they've got the money, but if hospitals want to bypass parents' approval and force abortions, I wouldn't even see that as a crime, because that's how strongly supportive I am towards not wanting more kids to grow up in poverty with parents that can't look after them, with parents that are 12 or whatever. I know the 12-year-old does grow, but even in 3 years' time, the 12-year-old's going to be still 15. There's plenty of time for her to have a child when she's more ready and more able and more prepared. But yeah, I want to say that, I'm God. Surely my views matter on something like this, and I strongly agree with abortion, and I even agree with abortion if the mother doesn't agree, providing there's enough proof to prove that you are not capable of raising a child. Would you want to be born by someone knowing that you're only going to go into the foster care system. I think adoption's slightly different because some people adopt because they can't have kids themselves. So there are some, good reasons why people should be born in and given to the adoption, because there's a lot of people that really want to adopt and adoption is their only option because they can't have it. But if you know it's going to be a battle of foster care versus foster care, would you want a life where you just bounce from one person to the other, always feeling rejected, always feeling like your parents didn't really want you or whatever? I would not want that life, and therefore by forcing kids to be born into this situation, then you're forcing a lifetime of suffering onto kids. But yeah,